Good morning. No, morning. Good evening. Good evening, Oberlin. My name is Jim. If anyone here was here last week about the same time, you may remember me. I was here at about 5 o'clock. Because of scheduling, I had to come a little bit earlier today. But I'm really excited to be here today, to be able to talk about a subject that I think is important for all of us to have a good understanding on. Last week I kind of let the cat out of the bag. I am a Christian who believes that Jesus is real, He is the Lord. And my hope is that by coming up here and sharing what I've learned over the last few years, that you would be persuaded at least to think more about this subject than maybe you did before hearing me talk. So last week I spoke on science and faith and how they are not at all at odds with each other if we leave out a lot of the unnecessary assumptions that are made frequently by people. I love science and I love Jesus, and I don't think either of them are at odds. So today I'm going to be talking on the subject of philosophy. Really excited to be able to share, so I hope that you guys find some value in it this evening. The first time I can recall or remember having any kind of experience or thoughts on the subject of philosophy was when I was 9 years old. I remember my grandfather passed away, and he died of leukemia, and he was my last grandparent that was living until he passed. And so I just remember feeling really sad and angry and hurt, because everybody who was my age, they all had grandparents alive, like pretty much all four of them in most cases. And so it was just really frustrating to me that I was robbed of that experience of not having grandparents in my life. And I remember just getting really mad at God and asking Him, why did He let that happen? And just really, really frustrated that, like I said, that was the cards that was dealt to me in this particular case. Now, there's a lot of people that have gone through way worse, but for me, that was a real problem that I had felt and went through when I was a young boy. And without even realizing it, that when I voiced that frustration and gotten upset about that, I was actually dipping into one of the deepest and most important and impactful philosophical questions that we can ask is, why does God let bad things happen to good people? Or just why does He let bad things happen in general? So that was, like I said, my first kind of experience and foray into philosophy, not even knowing it as a young child. And then as I grew older, I recognized that I was asking a pretty deep question. On a separate subject, we'll pick up on that here in a little bit, but separate question that I think is extremely important and impactful is for people who don't believe in God. They go by different names. Sometimes, usually the common term is atheist. People will also be referred to as a naturalist, somebody who believes in nothing but what they can see, touch, and feel and experience with their senses. So, for that person, what struck me once, something I learned, is that you cannot believe in objective morality if you do not believe in God. It doesn't matter what God you believe in at this point. We'll get there later. But if you don't believe in God, at least at that basic level, you cannot believe in objective morality, that things are just inherently right or wrong, that they never change. For example, that if somebody were to be murdered, you cannot believe that is morally wrong. You can just not prefer it as an atheist or a naturalist. And specifically, just to kind of get a little more detail, because I mentioned this last week and I want to get into a little more detail on this week, that the exact same moral thing, under an atheist perspective, the exact same moral thing has happened if, which I've unfortunately done in the past, accidentally run over a squirrel with my car, if I step on a cockroach, if I cut down and burn a tree for a campfire, or if I just pluck a blade of grass up out of the ground, if I beat a 2-year-old, or if I gunned down a family of 4, morally, nothing distinguishes those things for the atheist or the naturalist. The reason that that's the case is because the atheist or the naturalist believes that we are all here by random chance and time, with matter colliding and coalescing rather, and just developing and growing without any actual direction. And if that's the case, if every tree, every human, every dog, every animal, plant, whatever on this planet just came here because of a random collection or a random series of events, and we're all just some strange collection of molecules that come together and we call ourselves human, and we call the green stuff you're walking on grass, if we're all just different series and sets and collections of molecules, then there's nothing moral that any one of us or anything can do to another thing. It's just one set of molecules having its way or imposing itself on another. And you can't get moral, objective morality from that. You need to have some sort of purpose for us being here. There needs to be some inherent value to us as humans or this planet or the animals that are here for you to believe that something is morally right or wrong definitively, that there is no question. To be able to say that for someone to murder another person is wrong, you need to have some type of higher moral value, some standard that is set. You can only get that with some type of faith or belief in God. If you are an atheist or a naturalist, you cannot have that same thing. You can only, like I said, prefer that things not happen in a certain way, or dislike that something happened. And on another point, what's interesting is because I'm not unaware of the location I'm at. I'm at the center of a town square, mostly built up around a college, which is in some cases world renowned. There are people from all over the world that come to study at Oberlin College. It's an amazing place, and for the last probably 40 to 50 years at least, it is pretty well understood, commonly believed, I should say, that if you are a highly educated person, that it is more likely that you do not believe in God, because believing in God is for dumb or simple people. What is interesting is that over the years, over the course of human history, is that has not commonly been the assumption. Only until very, very recently have the higher educated areas, higher educated people, been assumed to be non-believers or people who do not believe in God or Jesus specifically, that over the course of history, predominantly the most intelligent and most well-educated people have been believers, and specifically Christians over the last 1,000 to 1,500 years. Some of the smartest people in history are professing Christians. Galileo, Isaac Newton, Thomas Aquinas, I can go on. But the point is that we have only recently, as Christians, essentially allowed ourselves to back away from higher areas of learning and just say, that's fine, we'll leave it to you. And I think that has been one of the greatest mistakes that the Christian church has committed as a whole in the last many decades. It's just a gigantic mistake to allow that assumption to take place. What's also interesting is that the founders of America were all theists, and many of them Christians. In fact, belief in God was the linchpin upon which we assert that, quote, all men are created equal. Today we would say people are created equal as we properly expand that definition. And although we've frequently fallen short of that righteous declaration, it would have zero logical foundation without the assumption that objective morality exists, something atheists cannot claim, as I explained earlier. To take it a step further, Judeo-Christian belief is the only major religion to affirm that all people are inherently equal and valuable. My wife comes from a nation that is predominantly Buddhist, and in the Buddhist religion and Hindu religions, they frequently have beliefs in caste systems where just because you were born to a certain family, that makes you inherently less valuable or less important than another person who was born by a different family. There are religions out there that would place a lower value on women simply because they were born female. Christianity does not do that thing at all. It does not believe that. You will never see in the Bible ever, anywhere, that women or any other person are inherently less valuable, no matter what their relationship is to God, simply by being whatever they are. On another subject I want to dive into a little bit, it's been said, I'm sure we've heard people say this, I have my truth and you have yours. Don't tell me what I believe is wrong. I won't tell you what you believe is wrong, and we'll all be happy and go on our way. I'm sure we've all heard people say things like that. This inherently involves logical contradictions, which is a problem. It's mathematically impossible if you believe in a world like that. Just think of the Apollo space mission. If one scientist's version of truth is real and the other one prefers a different version of truth, then I highly doubt their calculations would have allowed them to land on the moon and do a whole lot of other amazing things scientifically, which just highlights the fact that objective truth is real. There is no such thing as my truth and your truth. There is just the truth. There is just things that are not true, and there is no wiggle room there. You're either believing in truth, something that is factually correct, or something that is not factually correct. The reason we come to this line of thinking, it got popularized, was from a German philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche, who lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was raised as a Christian, and he's been partly responsible for the malleability of truth concept that is so prevalent today. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's got a lot of quotes. You can easily Google plenty of what Friedrich Nietzsche has stated. They're very interesting. Some things are very thought-provoking, and some things are just very disturbing. He's known to have been quoted saying, "Woman was God's second mistake." Obviously insinuating that making man was his first, but to just come out and say women was God's second mistake is, I think, pretty disturbing. He said, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." Not exactly the outlook on life that I would like to emulate. He's probably most famously quoted as saying, "God is dead." So you can tell his religious beliefs at this point. He's quoted as saying, "There are no facts, only interpretations." Sound familiar? "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." Here's another one. "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist." And my personal favorite quote of Friedrich Nietzsche, which just highlights the contradictory nature of a lot of things that he would say and believe, was, "The worst readers are those who behave like plundering troops. They take away a few things they can use, dirty and confound the remainder, and revile the whole." And as you look at his outlook on life and on truth, that he did not believe that there was a finite point of truth to be able to point to on anything, that facts and truth are malleable. And he goes ahead and says that the worst type of people are the ones that read something, misinterpret it, and just defile whatever they're reading. He's insinuating by this objection that there actually is a finite, specific meaning that you can get from a certain set of words or from a thing or a point of truth or fact, and yet contradicts that just in some of his other quotes. And I would submit to you that this happens very frequently with the Bible, that people will try to say, well, that's your interpretation of the Bible, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the Bible means or that's what God thinks, so I don't have to listen to what you say, even if you quote the Bible word for word as saying something and the meaning is clear. I've heard people just very bluntly and very stubbornly say, well, that's your interpretation. There is no my interpretation, your interpretation. There is the facts. The Bible can say something, whether you believe that's an authoritative text or not, that's another question. But something or someone can say something, can believe something definitively, and that is a finite point of truth. That is a finite fact, at least that they've said it. And there is not just this wild group of random interpretations of something or of anything, and leading to the conclusion that objective facts do not exist. They absolutely do. Let me tell you a little bit about Friedrich Nietzsche's life. As I said, he lived in Germany. He lived there as Nazism was on the rise. His father passed at 5 years old. He's extremely smart. He served as a military medic in the late 1800s and caught multiple diseases which would eventually kill him. He lived a very painful life, which was brought on by, like I said, these illnesses. He was in constant pain. His sexist and anti-Semitic attitudes killed his relationships with people around him. By the time he was 35, he was so sick he could not work. By the time he was 45, he had completely lost his mind. He died in his mid-50s alone. And you're going to look at this guy's life. So he's speaking, he's a philosopher, pretty well-known and well-renowned and respected philosopher. And he's quoted as saying all these things: God is dead, woman was God's second mistake, there are no facts, only interpretations. You have your way, I have mine, that's for the right way, correct way, the only way, it doesn't exist. He says all these things, and you can see his mindset, you can see his outlook on life, but as you look at his life and what he's lived, you can almost, you feel bad for him, because he lived this life that was not at all ideal. His father's dead at 5. He's growing up in one of the worst eras in the history of humankind, rising Nazi Germany. He's extremely smart, to his credit. He tried to help. He joined the military as a medic to be able to help people. Ends up catching multiple illnesses that end up killing him far before his time. Can't work by 35. I'm 32. I can't imagine in 3 years being so sick and so ill that I cannot work. That would crush me as a man, as a husband, as a provider in my home. That would crush me to not be able to do that. At 45, he's completely lost his mind. He's crazy. So not only is he in pain and he's extremely sick, now he's gone almost completely crazy by the time he's in his not even his middle-aged years. And long before his time, before he could ever even be considered an old man, he's gone. He's dead. Alone. So we look at this man's life, and so many people in the higher educated world look up to this person, but you tend to feel bad for him. You tend to pity him, not want to revere and follow him. My opinion is not somebody that we should be following, but somebody that we should be feeling bad for. But that's just my opinion. So this type of thinking leads to objections. You know, when we talk about objective facts don't exist, if you take that type of a outlook on life, this type of thinking leads to objections like the brain in the vat theory. If you've not heard of this, the people who believe in the brain in the vat theory, or at least suggest it, are people who would say, how do you know that we're actually living and breathing and walking around as human beings and living a life, you know, growing up, experiencing life and dying? How do you know that that's really reality? How do you know we're not really just a brain in a vat of chemicals being stimulated by some scientist or by some alien species or something like that, and that's not the reality that we're experiencing? And to that, I say, is that really reasonable? Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that we are just a brain in a vat being stimulated by chemicals? I mean, if you do, then please explain to me, show me some type of evidence or proof or some type of reasoning that would lead you to think that that is a reasonable place to land on your outlook on life. I don't believe that, to be very clear. I believe that we are all actually here. I believe I was actually born at one point in the past. I am here before you, living and talking, and you're walking around here, sitting here, just doing life on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, early evening in the town of Oberlin, Ohio. I don't believe that this is an illusion. And I believe that what we do matters. I believe that what you do matters. I believe that what you and I believe matters. And I think everyone else here would too, if you really put some serious consideration to that. And as I think about the person who might actually believe that or might think of that being a good objection to, okay, well, I'm not going to believe what you're saying because we could just all be in some fantasy land. I would point out that many years ago, there was a Christian who wrote, and he became very well known for writing much of what is now known as the New Testament in the Bible. In the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 25, it says, "For many exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worship the creature rather than the Creator." There's a lot of people out here that will do anything they can, go to any length to not believe in the gospel or not believe that God exists, and posit really strange theories like the brain in the vat theory, and just walk away stubbornly saying, I'm not going to believe what you say or believe in God. Scripture pretty clearly tells what's going on with that person, that people have just exchanged the truth for a lie. For whatever reason, they find it more comforting and better to live their life in this lie rather than believe in Jesus. On a side note, why do we revere things and respect things more than we respect and revere God? It's really strange how people will glorify another person or glorify a certain way of living or glorify a possession of some sort, or like, when I say way of living, I imagine the extremely wealthy person who just wants to fly around and party all the time and just spend money on stupid things that they really have no business spending their money on. And we as a society, we're almost groomed to think that is a great way of living. You got so much money, you don't know what to do with it. You're just throwing it at different things that you couldn't possibly need, and expecting that to bring you some kind of joy or happiness. Why do we aspire to that? It makes no sense. Atheists or the naturalist often mischaracterize the word faith to mean blind, illogical, unreasonable trust. And this is completely wrong. A Christian or a person who believes in God says, when they say, I have faith in God, that doesn't mean that they just blindly believe without reason in God, or blindly believe without reason something. Faith, at least from a biblical definition of the word faith, is not blind trust. It is trust built on evidence and experience. For example, I am married. My wife is not here with me. And although I cannot prove that she is not cheating on me right now, I have full trust that she's not. Because I have a relationship with her. I know her. I know her character. I know the life that her and I are trying to build together. And I trust that when I am not with her, and she likewise trusts that when I am not with her, that we are not out ruining what we are attempting to build together, this life that we're attempting to build together. That is a more accurate definition of faith. I have faith that my wife is being faithful to me. That is not blind trust built on nothing. That is trust, that is faith in an individual that I have come to know and love and appreciate. And that is exactly the context, the way that a Christian says, I have faith in God. Not blind faith. It is a trust that God exists for good reasons. Now, I say that to say that there are plenty of Christians or people who believe in God who do truly believe in God out of blind, illogical, unfounded, unreasonable faith. And that is not the same kind of faith that I'm talking about. That is truly somebody who just believes in God, which I would say is a good thing, but for the wrong reasons. There are great reasons to believe in God, something hopefully I am expressing clearly to you and doing hopefully a serviceable job today at explaining there are good reasons to believe in God. Another objection from a philosophical standpoint would be to say that because the universe is so big and so massive and so endless in its scope and size, that if the universe was created by a person or God, that it would be an extremely inefficient use of time and material and resources. So just to think about the galaxy and its scope and all I think there's thousands, if not more, I could be wrong in the count, thousands of other galaxies out there and all the gigantic amount of space in between them. just looking at the universe in a whole, one might be tempted to say, wow, that's a really inefficient use of resources and time. But that only applies to people who have limited resources and time. And God, at least the God of the Bible, is somebody who is limitless in his resources, matchless in his ability to work in time. There's some people ask what I believe is a silly question: can God make a rock so heavy he can't lift it? Because if he can make that rock and then he can't lift it, then he's not all powerful, right? Because Christians like to say God can do all things. He's all powerful, which he is. But if he can make a rock so heavy that he can't lift it, then he's not all powerful. Likewise, if he can make a rock that's so heavy that he can't lift it, he's now created a logical impossibility, which doesn't make sense, and which is the problem with the question in the first place. When we say that God is all powerful, he can do all things, we mean he can do all logical things, all things that are reasonable. We believe that he is supernatural and he can interfere with the natural course of life and natural happenings of things, so that way he can heal somebody who might be sick, so that he can give somebody a point of wisdom or a thought that might be a great response in a specific important situation, that he can help somebody, guide somebody through a difficult time. He can do these things, right? These are logically, reasonably possible, not creating logical impossibilities in the first place. Some people say that God doesn't exist because he is not an embodied mind, right? People who don't believe in God understand that God does not have a body. Okay, he is a person without a body. He is a mind without a body. He is spirit. And so they say that because that is how believers would define God, that because we've never seen another being without a body or a mind without a body, that the odds of God existing are near zero because we've never seen it before. And while that can seem like a reasonable objection, I would point out to you that the only life that we are aware of is on Earth. We have never been able to prove that life exists outside of Earth, yet we are currently furiously engaged in looking and searching for life outside of this planet. Many, many, many people believe that there is some type of life, or that we will eventually find some other kind of life, whether it's microscopic or a full-fledged, fully formed, sentient alien being, that we'll be able to find this. Well, I would say to you, if you're going to use that same argument as for God, because he does not have a body, therefore we should not expect for such a being to exist, then you should not expect for life to exist outside of this planet. And I trust that just because we're saying that the only life we observe is here on Earth, that you're not going to logically assume that there is no other life on Earth or outside of Earth, that there could be. You believe in the possibility that life exists elsewhere. And that's not unreasonable to think. Now, we can debate whether that's actually true or not, and that's fine, but that's completely separate from the fact that it is logically possible for something to exist that we have never observed before. So I think likewise that falls apart. Another interesting thing is that when we talk about life, how it got here, how we got here, and what to expect when you see a person or a tree or some animal, and we think, wow, that is the product of evolution, right? That is the scientific suggestion that evolution, or a random collection of molecules and unguided process, has produced this thing. Or maybe, to put it at a more macro level, the universe collected into this very organized, relatively very organized place. Our galaxy, our solar system is very organized. We have the central sun at the center of it. That its gravitational pull holds numerous planets around it in a very orderly orbit. And we see that, and we make the conclusion, wow, this is a product of a lot of time and random chance and matter coming together. And we say that God had nothing to do with that. That's an unguided process. And I think it's a little bit strange for us to assume that God has nothing to do with it, because if we were to walk down the street and we see a watch sitting on the sidewalk, Or likewise, I can see plenty of cars here parked on the side of the road. Or if we see a computer in a room, when we see these things, they're very complex, and we naturally assume that those things have a creator. They're too complex to have just come into existence. We do not believe that cars are a product of a tornado passing through a junkyard. That would be very unreasonable to believe that a car somehow, in its perfect working order and extreme complexity, when we look at it and we say, this was assembled or created by a person or a group of people, we don't assume that it was created by random chance or collection of molecules. That there was a purpose, an intention behind the creation of a car, a watch, a computer, because of its complexity. Let me tell you that the earth, a simple plant, you and I, we are far, far, far more complex than a watch or a car or a computer. The level of detail that makes us what we are composed of, how we function, is just orders of magnitude far more complex than a car or a watch or a computer. These things are extremely, extremely, extremely simple machines in comparison. So why do we look at another person or a tree or a blade of grass or the earth or as a whole or as our universe or as a solar system and say that's just a product of random chance and collection of molecules from an unguided process? It makes no sense. A simple, logical, philosophical argument that I find interesting and enjoy is called the Kalam cosmological argument. The Kalam cosmological argument is a favored argument by theists who believe in God. We're not talking about just simply Christians, or specifically Christians, I should say. I say simply just the theist who believes in God. This particular argument was created by a Muslim philosopher about 400 or 600 years ago, something like that. It has three premises. Number one, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Again, number one, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Number two, the universe, or all space, time, and matter, just to make sure that everybody understands what the universe is, not just the matter, but space, the things in between the matter, and time. The universe began to exist. Most people believe it was through the process of the Big Bang. Again, the universe, all space, time, and matter began to exist. That's the second proposition. Third one, therefore, the universe has a cause. So again, everything that begins to exist is a cause, number one. Number two, the universe, all space, time, and matter began to exist, Big Bang. Number three, therefore, the universe has a cause. This cause is necessarily spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, and personal. It has to be these things. In order to create this, it needs to be all of those things. You cannot create space if you live inside it. You need to be outside of space to be able to create it. Timeless. Again, time is wrapped up in the definition of what universe is. You need to be timeless to be able to create time. Immaterial. Again, we're talking to create things. You cannot be a thing yourself to be able to create it. You must be powerful. I think it goes without saying. You must be personal. Personal meaning that there is an intention, a purpose behind what you're doing. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I would suggest to you that God created everything in the universe for a purpose. And these things, being spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, it's a perfect definition of God. An interesting point that not all religions share is that Christianity can be proven false. Might sound strange hearing a Christian say that. Christianity could be proven false. You need to do one thing. Produce the body of Jesus. If you could produce the body of Jesus, Christianity could be factually proven false. We do not believe that Jesus rose spiritually into heaven. We believe he rose bodily into heaven. When he died, when he was crucified, and by our belief, 3 days later, rose from the dead, and he spent about a month around the people that he worked with and then rose into heaven with his whole body, the Jewish leadership were frantically, desperately searching for a body to prove he was dead, to prove that what he was saying was false. The Christian religion could be proven false if you can produce Jesus' body. You say, that's impossible. It's 2,000 years ago. We find mummies that are many thousands of years older than Jesus. So don't tell me it's impossible. It's possible that we could find remains of Jesus. If you can find his body or some type of proof of his body, you could prove Christianity false. A few more points. Scientifically minded folk would assert that the universe created itself, which is clearly contradictory. To say that X created X makes the assumption that X already exists in the first place and therefore isn't a valid explanation for the existence of X, since nothing has ever been the cause of its own existence, which defeats the purpose of making this statement in the first place and only proves that nonsense is still nonsense even if it's uttered by a scientist. We are the only form of life ever to walk this planet, to aspire, to be creative, to wonder why, to make moral choices, and to wonder, how did I get here? Think of it. So the Earth has been here about 4.6 billion years by scientific measurement. There has been life on this planet for several billion years, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's around 2 billion or so. I could be wrong on that. Doesn't matter. At least hundreds and hundreds of millions of years. And we humans have been on the earth for, I've heard estimates between 10,000 to 100,000 years on the high end. I might be a little off on that, but not by much. And in that very, very, very short time frame, in comparison to every other form of life on earth, we are the only thing to aspire to be creative, to think, to be self-aware. Why, if we are just, again, a random collection of unguided material coming together as life, why are we the only one that has ever been able to do that? Unless we're special, unless we're unique, unless there's something about us that is different. Some people might take exception to the claims of the New Testament Bible, especially, specifically. That's the one that usually gets most of the attention because the New Testament claims that Jesus lived his life, died on a cross, rose from the dead, ascended into heaven. So people want to say that the accounts are inaccurate. And they say that the Bible is essentially just a list of a cascading telephone game stories where, well, the truth may have been known 2,000 years ago, but over the course of time we've reinterpreted and retranslated over and over and over, and now we have no proof of what really happened 2,000 years ago, or if Jesus even existed. We have no proof of that, is the claim that can be made. To that I will tell you that currently, and this is a low estimate because I've heard higher, we have over 20,000 examples of New Testament letters and books written from very shortly after the death and resurrection of Jesus, so when Christianity first became a thing. Starting from that point, within just a few years, I think the earliest one is within 3 years of his resurrection, a written example, written letter. We have this letter from that short of the period after his death and resurrection, until several hundred and even more than 1,000 years later, we have 20,000 examples, again on the low end, of New Testament letters and books written all across that long period of time. And so if somebody's going to claim that the Bible is just a game of telephone, essentially, and that we can't believe what it says because it's been reinterpreted and retranslated over the years and the facts in it cannot be trusted, then we should expect that over these 1,000+ years and 2,000 years now since Jesus lived and died, that we would expect that what our Bible says today would not say the same thing as what it said 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, and shortly after the letters and books began to be written. But they are 99% in agreement with each other. From day one to today, the scriptures that we have, the old ancient 20,000, like I said, 20,000 examples on the low end of pieces of scripture, and what they say match 99% with what we have today, with what I've got in my hand. 99%. And that 1% difference has nothing to do with any doctrine that a Christian believes. They are minuscule words. For example, he jumped over the log, or he hopped over the log, or he leapt over the log. There's little teeny tiny words like that that are different that essentially mean the same thing, where no doctrine is affected. That is an incredible thing. When we're talking about the veracity and the consistency of the Scriptures, if they're to believe, then they should be consistent from day one to today, and they are. Final thing I want to talk about is going back to that first point that I had made when I opened this up. Like I said, when I was 9 years old, my last grandparent died. I didn't know the other three. Two of them died before I was born. Another one died when I was 2. And my grandfather on my father's side died when I was 9 years old. And most kids of my age had all their grandparents, so I felt very gypped. I felt very frustrated and mad that I went through this. And like I said, I acknowledge there's a lot of people that go through a whole lot worse, definitely, but that was a real frustration and hurt and pain of mine as I grew up. And so that left me to wonder, God, why are you letting this bad thing happen? It's not fair. Why couldn't I have my grandfather in my life? Why couldn't I have any of my grandmothers in my life? Why couldn't I have had my mom's dad in my life? And we can all sit here and think of specific examples from our own life. God, why did you let this happen to me? Why did you do this? Why did you let this go? Why did so-and-so have to die? Why did this person get hurt? Why did I lose this person that I was interested in? We can ask plenty of questions in our own personal life and ask God, why did you let this happen? God, why do you let innocent people be killed in Nazi Germany? 6 million plus Jewish people murdered. Why did you let that happen, God? My wife is from Cambodia. There was a dictatorship that ruled there for many years. Pol Pot, Khmer Rouge. That might sound familiar to some people who are students of history. God, why did you let somewhere between 1 to 3 million of that tiny nation's people be killed by a ruthless dictator? God, why did you let that happen? There was recently floods in Europe. I think there was like over 100 people that were killed. God, why did you let that happen? We know people in our lives that have had unfortunate things happen to them. A young woman gets raped by a family member. Can't speak about it. God, why did you let that happen? You get fired when you're already up to your eyeballs in debt, and you have to provide for a family member or your whole family. Maybe you're the only source of income, and you get fired for something that wasn't your fault. God, why are you letting this happen to me? There are many questions that you can ask along those same lines. And what it comes down to is that God gave us free will. And with free will, everybody in this earth having free will, that affects everything. You have the freedom to make choices in your life, whether to do good or evil. You have the freedom to make a choice that you don't even know is going to negatively impact somebody. There's a movie I've watched called Man of Steel. I'm sure many people have seen it. And in that movie, there's a scene where Superman's talking to his dad, and they're trying to figure out how to handle moral situations. And his dad says there was a rainstorm that came, and they live on a farm, and they're trying all night to make sure that the farm doesn't get flooded. And they did all this stuff to be able to divert the water, and they succeeded. Their farm was fine. But what they didn't know is that they re-diverted the water to a neighbor's farm and killed everything. They had no idea they were doing that, but they had their free will to be able to act that. And there's situations like that happen to us in our real life. Somebody makes a decision, they don't even know it's going to have a negative consequence, and it does. God, why do you let that happen? We have free will. He gave us free will. The question is why? Because we can either have a world with free will or a world without. Because the objection could be, God, if you really are love, or if you really love us, love people, then why did you create free will? Why did you not just simply make us incapable of choosing to live without you and just choosing you? Why did you make us capable of such evil? And to that you have to say two things. Number one is that we chose to do evil. God did not make us do evil. So that's an important distinction. Number two, and I'll appeal to your sense of love and affection that we all have. Everybody here I trust, or at least most people have been in a relationship, or maybe are currently in one. And if you are in one, or if you've ever been in one, then you know the incredible feeling that you have when you first meet somebody special. When you meet that guy or girl or whatever, and you guys start talking, and you start getting to know each other, and you realize, oh, this person's really special. I really enjoy spending time around them. And you spend more and more and more time around them. You gain an appreciation for them. You gain an affection for them over a longer period of time. Maybe you get married. You have a family. But the point is, you have this really intimate relationship with this other person. And those moments when you realize that this person loves you and you love them, those are moments impossible to capture. Those are moments impossible to bottle up. And it seems like as humans, we're always kind of chasing after that first emotion, that first point when I fell in love with this girl or that guy or whatever. We're always chasing after that feeling. It's one of the most powerful, one of the most amazing feelings that we experiences that we can have in this life, is falling in love with somebody. And I submit to you that that is the best reason why God should allow us to have free will. Because, and I can personally attest to this, when you choose to walk in a relationship with God, it is the most amazing experience, the most amazing feeling you could possibly have. It is indescribable with words. I could try to describe it for hours and do it wholly, completely in injustice. There would be no way I could possibly do any real justice to describing the feelings that I have for the Lord and the feelings that He has for me. Because that free choice that I have to choose Him or not walk with Him. I used to be an atheist. I was definitely not walking with Jesus at one point. And when I decided that I was going to love Jesus and walk with Him and have this intimate relationship with Him, obviously not of a romantic type, because that's the one I was referring to earlier, so I'm obviously talking about a different type of relationship at this point. But when I made that decision, my whole life changed. It was amazing, and I have never been able to capture that specific moment back when I first decided to follow Jesus. It was the most amazing experience and moment of my life. But you know what? God's been good to me. Despite all the ups and downs, God's been good. And He's worth me continuing to pursue. I place my trust in Him, and I have no hesitation, I have no regret. And I think, honestly, because we could talk forever about human suffering or bad things happening to good people or whatever. We could talk for a long time about that and have, a lot of good conversation and probably still get nowhere. But I think the better question to ask is not why did God allow suffering, but what is God doing on a cross? What is God doing on a cross? Why is Jesus on a cross? If He is God, and if He is all-powerful, why is He on a cross? We need to know the answer to that question. Why is the most powerful being in the universe on a cross? Being tortured and killed for something He didn't do. Why is He on a cross? The answer is because Jesus is not distant from our pain and suffering, but rather chose to become part of it with us. You and I go through all sorts of crazy things throughout our life, and I'm sure none of it feels fair. And God knows what it feels like because He chose to be there with us, to understand physically what that felt like, emotionally what that felt like. He didn't have to come here as a human being to declare He's God. He is God all on His own. He doesn't need our help, doesn't need anything from us. But He came here for a purpose, to tell you, to show you that He loves you. That He knows that you go through pain. He knows that you go through some stuff. He knows. And He got up on a cross and paid the penalty for all of our sins, because all of us, at some point in our life, at least once, have done something really stupid. And a lot of times, especially in my case, I did that multiple times a day, daily, for many years. I did a whole lot of stupid things, a whole lot of bad things, immoral things. And Jesus saw that and said, I'm going to pay the price for that. Because sin is offensive to God. But he doesn't just set a standard and say, you got to meet this standard and walk away and that's it. He set a standard, knows we can't meet it, met it himself, and just say, look, I know you can't be perfect like I can be perfect, but if you believe in me, I can overlook that. I'll forgive you. I'll accept you. I'll love you. That's what Jesus did. And we could talk about, like I said, our suffering, our individual pains and hurts and all that stuff. But what happened, the question is, why is Jesus on a cross? He's on the cross because he's not distant from us in our pain. He's close to us in our pain. He died on the cross and he made the offer of forgiveness to you. Will you accept it, is the question. Jesus died on the cross for all people, yes. Some people say that, that's great, and they just assume that because Jesus did that, they're good. And that's not the case. You need to accept that you're a sinner, just like I accepted I was a sinner, just like my friend Matt has accepted he was a sinner, is a sinner. I am a sinner. I'm not formerly, I am. I mess up all the time. Today, currently, I am not perfect. My wife will tell you. You accept that you're a sinner and that you need Jesus to forgive you. And like I said, some people just think, oh, because Jesus did that, then they're good. They just understand that's what God did and that's fine. But that's not as simple as that. You need to accept his offer of forgiveness and walk with him. It's no different than if I were to give you a Christmas present, wrapped up, and I got it in my hand. Say, this is for you. But if you never take it from me and open it and receive it, that's not yours. You don't have it. I could have the next iPhone in a little box for you. Hey, here's yours. You can just have it. Or gift wrap a nice little Ferrari for you. It's all yours. Here's the keys. But if you never come up and take the keys from me, that Ferrari is not yours. It's yours for the taking, if you choose it, if you want it. But you've got to come and take it. And that's the offer that Jesus makes for all of us. He's died on the cross for your sins. He has forgiven you, but you need to receive that forgiveness to have eternal life. I got a few books sitting up here. If anyone's interested, I'm going to describe them here really quick. Before I forget, there's one of them that I was looking for. I think I loaned it to somebody, and I don't have it anymore. It's called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. It's a story about a investigative reporter who was an atheist. He hated God, and one day his wife comes home believing in God, and so he set out on a mission, personal mission, to disprove God so his wife would stop believing in silly things. And he interviewed and investigated his way into Christianity, because he found out that the truth claims that the Gospels make are real. They're no joke. That's an excellent book. Again, Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. We've got a book up here called Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell. Sean McDowell is a PhD, obviously a very smart person. It is a very large book that talks about all the different reasons why you should believe in God. Much like I did, I covered a little bit of everything today, from science to history to comparative religion to philosophy was the main subject today, and the book does much a similar thing. Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, another former atheist who used to argue that against the faith and tell people publicly, because he had a radio station, he used to tell people publicly why their Christian faith was false, and eventually came to the faith and ended up being one of the greatest advocates for Christianity in the early 1900s. He wrote, you may know him from the Narnia movies. He wrote those books back in the day. Another one that I've yet to read, but I'm very familiar with the writer and his life and what he's done. It's called Seeking Allah and Finding Jesus. It's the story of a Muslim seeking to deepen his faith in Allah, in Islam, and ends up, after looking into the life and history of Jesus, ends up accepting him as Lord. So it's very interesting. He was not attempting to become a Christian. He had no intention of that. But he became a Christian after looking into the claims of Jesus and of Christianity. Another book called Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace. He is a cold case homicide detective. His job is to look into murders that have happened years ago, where oftentimes many of the people involved in the murder are dead. You cannot interview them. You cannot question them. You can only look at what the reports say and maybe a few pieces of evidence that are still retained, and then come to a decision as to who committed the murder, and hopefully find that person and put them in prison where they belong. So that was his job. And he had a buddy of his on the force who kept nagging him about coming to church and blah, 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 and be a Christian. And he said, look, would you just read the Gospels? Just read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Just do that and come back to me. Can you do that? He said, all right, fine, I'll do that. And when he read the Gospels, he realized these are 4 eyewitness accounts of the same life, of the same person, and ended up coming to Christ. Again, an atheist coming to Christ through investigative research as a cold case homicide detective. Improbable Planet by Hugh Ross. He's an astrophysicist and a Christian. He describes the practical impossibility of life existing on Earth without God being directly involved, because the amount of criteria that we need to make, or that need to be met for the universe, our solar system, our Earth, to be life permitting, are so vast. There's so many things that need to happen that it would essentially be a massive miracle if, on a natural, unguided basis, all these things happen. And he lays that out, and it's very, very interesting. Reasonable Faith by William Lane Craig. He is a philosopher and somebody who debates for the Christian faith. He's somebody I really respect and enjoy listening to. This guy is one of those people who I would describe as just scary smart. He's got a book which, again, just outlines all of the reasons why he is a Christian. And he, like I said, he's extremely intelligent, and I think that a lot of the things that he says are more than worth looking into and considering. A book called Darwin's Doubt by Stephen C. Meyer. Stephen Meyer is a very, very smart, I believe he's got a PhD in science. He believes that the Earth and the universe and everything here is here by what's called intelligent design. He works with theists, not exclusively Christians, but they all believe that the Earth is here by intelligent design, that the life here is all here not by accident or unguided process. And this book, Darwin's Doubt, written by Stephen Meyer, highlights a lot of that. And then I've also got a book up here that my buddy brought. It says, Knowing the Doctrines of the Bible. If you are curious at all as to why we believe the things that we believe, or what we believe, that book is a pretty extensive explanation of everything that the average Christian believes. Non-denominational Christian faith. You cannot borrow these books. They are mine to keep, but if you would like to come up here and look at them and get the names and titles and whatnot so that way you can look into them yourself, I would encourage you not to take a word that I said on faith, or blind faith, if you will. Do not trust what I said just because I'm saying it. Look into it as I did. I trust that you will come to a similar conclusion. I'm going to be around here for another 20 or 30 minutes, or until it rains, because it looks like it's about to rain. If you want to come up and ask me questions, I will do that. We can talk. If you want to debate with me or shout at me, I guess we can do that too. That's fine. I am not offended or afraid or anything. If you want to talk to me, if you're upset by something I said, then I would say that you are free to come and question that. I want to stress that while I may be very confident and very strong in some of my words and language up here, I will be nothing but respectful and nice to you if you decide that you'd like to come up and talk to me. I would just ask that you attempt to do the same. And yeah, so I appreciate your time. Hope you guys all have a safe and wonderful evening. Don't get wet, stay dry, stay warm, and God bless. Thank you.